Hello everybody, thanks again for coming this evening. It gives me real pleasure tonight to welcome Dr Jonathan Larwood, who is a friend as well as a colleague in geology and geoconservation. I first met Jonathan in I think 1993 at the Malverns conference that some of you may remember. And from that moment on we've been colleagues in geoconservation one way or another. And Jonathan's personal education starts with London, UCL, and then goes on to Aberystwyth where he studied ostracods. And he was looking after the paleontology side of a lot of what Natural England do. And now he is, as you can see, the Principal Officer for Geodiversity in Natural England.
For everything.
So without further ado, I'll hand over to Jonathan, who's going to tonight talk about conserving geoheritage in Staffordshire in its widest sense. Jonathan.
Okay, so hello everyone. This is a presentation that I gave at the Geologists Association's annual conference in Kiel last year, and it's an amble through stages in geoconservation in Staffordshire. But perhaps the most important bit here is it's in and out of Staffordshire. So you'll see how that becomes really relevant. And in one sense, it's a story of county lines. So it's a very modern story in that context. But we'll see how that emerges. So from that talk at Staffordshire, it is largely unscathed. But the in and out and maybe in again bit has enabled me to tilt it a little bit in a different direction as we go through it. Let's start. And let's start with thinking about... So I often start a talk with William Smith. And if we're not familiar with this, then you're not the Black Country Geological Society that I know and love. So this is William Smith's 1815 map, a delineation of strata in England, Wales, and a little bit of Scotland. And I usually start it because Smith obviously travelled round. He created the map to join geology up and connect it to the resources which he so valued and enable us to find them more ably. But in doing that, he made many observations of the places he visited. So I always look to see what William Smith had to say about a place. And so let's see what William Smith had to say about Staffordshire. He didn't have a lot to say about Staffordshire. Now, a lot of what Smith had to say is recorded in John Phillips's biography of Smith. Now, John Phillips was William Smith's nephew, and he, from a very young age, accompanied Smith on many and most of his journeys, and then wrote the biography of Smith. And in there are various accounts of conversations with Smith, and letters from Smith, and Phillips' own account of Smith's journeys and observations. So Smith, in 1802, got caught in Staffordshire because it was frosty and a bit snowy. So he got delayed and couldn't head home when he wanted to. But he did say, look, I found some fossils, they're in the marl, connected to some limestones, and nearly connected some ranges of coal up. So he was doing his usual thing, finding fossils and connecting different geologies up. And John Phillips says, yeah, okay, I think this refers to a patch of limestone, red marl in Arbury in Staffordshire. So he's tied it down a little bit. Now, this came from a letter that Smith wrote to his friend, the Reverend Richardson. So the other thing I looked at is Smith did county geology maps. And unfortunately, Staffordshire was one of the few counties where there isn't a completed map. There's just a draft of Staffordshire. So I didn't have that to draw on. But then if you look at, actually, you zoom in on the delineation of strata, he doesn't really need a county map because it's pretty much, here is the zoom in on Staffordshire as represented on Smith's big scale delineation of strata. And it kind of falls into three broad components. Grey for coalfields, blue for limestones, and the pinky red for the Trias. And in many ways, that is simply a summary of the geology which we see today in Staffordshire. If we zoom in a little bit more, in and out of Staffordshire maybe, this bit here, this is where we are, this is Dudley, and there's your Carboniferous limestones, but he's also familiar enough with Dudley to identify the limestones which define Dudley. It's your Silurian Wenlock limestones which make up the hills of Dudley, and we'll have a little bit more about those as we go on. So there's Birmingham, there's Dudley, there's Lichfield, that's Cannock Chase across there from Smith's map. How does that compare to now? Now, this isn't a geology talk I'm giving you, it's a geoconservation talk, so this is as complex as it's going to get. Smith said it was coal measures, Carboniferous limestones, Triassic sediments, and a few other little bits and bobs. And essentially that's what we have today. Modern geological map, here's your coal measures, here's your Carboniferous limestone, dominated by Triassic sediments, your massive river, fluvial sediments of the Triassic, and again, finding a little bit of Carboniferous in the bottom here. So Staffordshire, as we understand it today. What Smith didn't talk about was everything that sat on top of that, which is your drift deposits, which are really complex post-glacial deposits, dominated by proglacial lakes, meltwater rivers, and forming the Trent River Basin drainage system, which we're familiar with today. So that is very much where we get with Smith and modern geology, two pretty aligned. Now, what I've done with the Staffordshire geology and geoconservation is I've identified a series of dates which we can go through, which have some relevance, connection with the development of geoconservation in response to Staffordshire's geology. And the first one of those is that I'm going to pick out is 1862, Biddulph Grange. Now, I'm imagining that a number here of familiar with Biddulph Grange, been to Biddulph Grange, know something about what it's about. And this connects to a chap called James Bateman. First time I've noticed that, not Batman, but I quite like James Batman. I might just stick with that. That's pretty good. So, James Bateman. He was an industrialist and a banker, particularly associated with iron industry, so that's where he made his money. He was a notable plant collector and botanist, particularly associated with orchids. And he was also the founding president of the North Staffs Field Club. And I always find it interesting when you look at what those societies were all about. And the society was for the study of natural history, geology, industrial history, folklore, and local history. So that just reflects that really broad church that many of these societies, which are the forebears of what we're here today, were involved with. So he was also, James Batman was also a garden designer, and the most notable gardens he's designed were at Biddulph Grange, and they were essentially a continentally compartmentalized sequence of gardens representing different modern-day geographies and environments in a series of compartments connecting to a unique indoor gallery, the Geology Gallery. And the Geology Gallery was a representation of the formation of the Earth over 6 days, the 6 epochs, as envisioned through the creation story. And actually it was inspired by, so he was very well connected, attended lectures in Oxford, and listened to talks inspired by the work of the Scottish geologist Hugh Miller. The key to this gallery is this was the setting for the establishment of the world as created today. So the gallery sets that. How did we get to where we are today? and the world we see us, and it opens out into this garden of creation, the Garden of Eden, representing the world we see it today, the different continental gardens from all around the world, which is what he collected and brought into Biddulph Grange. So that's great. Actually, myself and Graham, so the gallery at Biddulph has been restored. It's been restored over the last 10 or so years. You can see it being dismantled there, quite exciting. Myself and Graham visited it in a state of dismantlement and had a look at a number of the specimens which had come out of the walls. And actually, quite excitedly, we found and saw in there, which wasn't recorded or anticipated, there's a pterosaur specimen in the material that's come out of there. Anyway, subsequently, National Trust, who own the site, have done sponsored all the restoration work on it, and since it's been mentioned, the Curry Fund of the Geologist Association supported some of the conservation work, particularly on a number of the specimens. This ichthyosaur specimen, where work was undertaken by Nigel Larkin, so restored, and I think a replica has gone back into the site. If you were at the GA conference, the National Trust were there, and I thought they'd bring a replica, but no, they brought the original specimen into the conference, which was great to see. Okay, so that's my starting point. That's my first date for what I think is a meaningful appreciation of and interest in the geology around us. And I take geoconservation in a really broad way. So geoconservation here is a demonstration of value, a unique gathering together of geological resources to tell a story that then connects into a designed garden. With the 6 days of the mosaic cosmogony. How exciting is that? So next set of dates. I've got 1890 and 1903, and I've added in 1919 there. Now this is a Geologists Association thing. So the Geologists Association has run, continues to run, and will run field excursions, and typically they ran in the 19th and most of the 20th century ran excursions around a format of an Easter excursion, a Whitsun excursion, and a summer-long excursion. And there is a really good record of those excursions in the proceedings of the Geologists Association. And supporting that and behind it is a photographic archival resource called the GA Carrick Archive, in which particularly from the late 19th through to the 1960s, 70s, there is a really good archive record of photographs documenting the field and other activities of the Geologists Association. So this is illustrative of it, and I looked to see where had the GA been in Staffordshire. So something I noticed about Staffordshire, it's all about North Staffordshire. They always go to North Staffordshire. So I think that's because when we looked at the map, all that coal, all that limestone, and those relationships are concentrated in the north. That's where all the industry is. And then it's dominated by a much flatter, less interesting, in inverted commas, Triassic floodplain with the Trent sitting on it. But that's by the by. So, 3 excursions to think about. 1890, which is the Easter field excursion, which is the one I've drawn out here. This is the start of it, and there's a beautiful record in the proceedings which usually tells you who went along, how they got there, what they got up to, what they thought about it. And this one I really love is because they thought they'd spent Easter holiday in a manufacturing and coal and iron centre. It would be anything but pleasant, and the director regrets that he did not advertise more strongly in the programme the beauties of the immediate neighbourhood, but he feels that those venturous spirits who bravely came to explore what they understood to be merely black country, I quite like that, were rewarded with as fine rock, wood and river scenery as any in the Midlands. So that's like it's a double-edged compliment, isn't it? So you didn't really try, but those who did got a really good trip out of it. So that was the Easter excursion. The 1903 is the Whitsun excursion. And then the 1919 excursion is the Llangollen excursion over into Wales. When I had a look at the Carrick archive, I did a search on Staffordshire photographs, and actually I couldn't find any photographs of trips to Staffordshire, but I found several references which compared the rocks in places they went to rocks they'd previously seen in Staffordshire. And this is typical. This is Etruria Mols. This is they're in the coal measures on the trip to Llangollen, and they're saying that they are the same horizon as the Etruria Mols in North Staffordshire, but they're not in North Staffordshire when they're describing it. Now, here's an interesting link. So, and I'd really encourage you to have a look at the archive, and there's one or two more pictures from the archive coming up. So, one of the great contributors to the GA Carrick archive was this person, Thomas William Reader, T.W. Reader, and he accompanied field excursions from about 1906 through to 1919 and took photographs and provided an album record of every single excursion that they undertook. This is a typical page with these well-composed images, all of which are labelled and described. And the thing to note is T.W. Reader in 1920 was the first recipient of the Fullerton Award. So T.W. Reader, first Fullerton, and here we have the most recent Fullertons in the audience. How about that? Okay, so those were my dates up to here. 1919 was where I got to. And then, so this is a moment in time. 1945, the National Geological Reserves Committee. So towards the end of the war, the Nature Reserves Investigation Committee was set up to specifically look at post-war reconstruction and the integration of, shall we just call it, nature into that effort. And they were charged with undertaking a comprehensive survey of our most important nature sites in England and Wales. And they realised, actually, geology is really important. We're not really covering it, so we need to set up what became the Geological Subcommittee of the Nature Reserves Investigation Committee, specifically to look at geology. And what's important there is this statement, this realization of the value of our geological diversity. I won't read it all, you can read it yourselves. The foundations of geological science were laid largely by investigations in this country, which is where we are. And the country should feel pride in the possession of classic sections or monuments of international fame and should be anxious for them to be adequately protected. And it was this recognition of the absolute value and uniqueness of our geology in the context of the work of the Nature Reserves Investigation Committee. And here we go, look, I've got the report here. That is the report from 1945. And there's a couple of things which I'll just read out within it to give you a sense of when this was happening, when this review was being undertaken. So the foreword, which is by Sir Lawrence Chubb, he says, "I may record that the subcommittee imperturbably held their meetings during the savage attack on London area by robot planes and did an immense amount of work in a very short time. And indeed, with such speed did they get through their task that, although they began much later than this committee, they finished their report first." So this was 1944 in London during post-Blitz, during the flying in of doodle bugs. So that just gives you a real sense of when and the pressure under which this was happening. And then the other thing which I'll just point out, and this always is so important, is the connections which were already so strong and supporting the work of this committee. And it's through the courtesy of the Geological Society of London, but also the Geologists Association, that this work was enabled, and the connections that those societies had to draw up a list of sites. So let's just look at the list. So what's in here? They were tasked with identifying a list of sites and places. And they identified those against different categories: conservation areas, which were large landscape scale areas, geological monuments, which were more discrete areas, registered sections, which sat within active quarries, and then controlled sections, which were when your quarry became inactive, where you had remaining sections, or natural sections became controlled sections. And here's the thing. So this is for England and Wales. So you've got all the sites they identified for England and Wales listed here. And here is Staffordshire. But what have we got in Staffordshire? We've got the Wren's Nest in Dudley. We've got Bruins Canal, we've got Dalton's Clay Pit, we've got the classic Staffordshire sites, so Dovedale, but that could be Derbyshire, we've got the Manifold Valley, could be Derbyshire today. They're on the edges, there's the Wyre Forest and Kimber region and so on. Look, Beacon Hill, Sedgley in Dudley. The Canal Basin, Dudley Castle. So this is where Staffordshire was in, but when we decided to change the county lines, Staffordshire was out. So this is the in and the out. I'll come back to that in a moment. The last thing I'll say about the report is the report has a list of participants in it and those who supported it. And you can have a look at this. They're all well-known geological names, such as, and I like a lot of these because they've got great names. So we've got Arkle, William Jocelyn Arkle, Ammonite man. We've got Wolverston Cope, Fred Wolverston Cope. And here was my Staffordshire connection because Wolverston Cope wrote the little geology GA field guide in 1958. They did a university town set of guides to Stoke-on-Trent, which was reprinted for the conference. We've got Kingsley Dunham, so he's Kingsley Dunham in here, who became Sir Kingsley Dunham, who is very connected. So if you go to the BGS, you'll often meet in the Kingsley Dunham Centre. And interestingly, he is someone I knew as a child because he was a lecturer at Durham, and I used to deliver newspapers to Sir Kingsley Dunham's house on my newspaper round. So there we go. How about that? We've got O.T. Jones, because I just like O.T. Jones as a name, so he's Owen Thomas Jones, so he's Paleozoic graptolite person from Wales. We've got Arthur Russell of the Russell Society, and then I spotted Professor H.L. Hawkins, and I don't think he's that well known, but he was a professor at Reading University. He was an echinoderm expert. But then I realised why I recognise him, because I have a notebook, and in my notebook I have quotes which I transfer between my notebooks, and I noticed that I've got a quote by Professor H.L. Hawkins. And I imagine you've all got this book, The Observer Book of Geology, because it slips into your pocket. It's really neat. So he wrote the foreword or the introduction to The Observer Book of Geology, and in it he says there is little risk of boredom in a life spent in a wonderland where everything is steeped in mystery that is not always soluble by honest inquiry. So he's talking about our geology. But what I like most is he says, but geologists are among the happiest and busiest of mankind. So I always carry that with me in my notebook. So I was really pleased to see that he was formative in identifying the sites which we today value and have valued so much. Okay. Where does this get us all? Ah, okay. So here I've tilted it. So this is this was in Staffordshire, but then it was out of Staffordshire, but it's now back in my talk properly. Okay. So I can't not at this moment, because they were right there listed. Your wren's nest, and though it wasn't described as salt wells in the report, it was Bruin's Canal section and Dalton's clay pit. What can I say? Date's uncertain on these, but hasn't the world changed? There's the wren's nest, viewed from looking in towards the east, I think. Yeah? Yes. Yep. Actually, and that's probably that face that you're looking at. That's the only one which I've got precisely dated. I think that's 1901 or 2. That's a British Association for the Advancement of Science photograph. The others are undated. They all sit in BGS's Geoscenic library, which also hosts the GA's Carrick library. They're all, I'm going to say they're all they're all early 20th century, I think. This is a lovely one. This is Bruin's Canal Basin with some of the mechanisms which we can consider what they're doing. Don't know, but they look interesting. Loading boats, and there are the tracks coming in to load the boats, which then went down into Dalton's. In, out, in. Right, here are my next set of dates for the Staffordshire talk. And again, it's all North Staffordshire, so there's not a Staffordshire Geology GA group, there's a North Staffordshire Geology Association group. So 1948 was when the North Staffs Geology group was formed. 90 years since the formation of the Geologists Association, and I just popped Curry Fund logo in there because the Curry Fund does this, help them with a party to celebrate 75 years of the North Staffordshire group a year or two ago. So that was a staff continuation. Right, so 1949. So this is a consequence of everything that's in here, which is the identification of the value placed on our nature and geology within our nature. It led to the establishment of our nature conservation legislation, the National Parks and Access to the Countryside Act. So that set up national parks, that's one thing, but it did a number of other things which bring us here today, brings me here today, whichever way you want to look at it. So it created the Nature Conservancy. The Nature Conservancy became the Nature Conservancy, the NCC, Nature Conservancy Council, became split into countries and became English Nature with Scottish Natural Heritage as was, Countryside Council for Wales as was, now Nature Scot and Nature Resources Wales, Natural Resources Wales. It gave the Nature Conservancy the powers to identify areas which were considered of special interest, special value, and it defined what it meant by special as relating to the flora, the fauna, or the geology or physiographical, region, morphological features of a place, a location. And it also gave, and I'll come back to National Nature Reserves, it gave the Nature Conservancy and all subsequent iterations of the Nature Conservancy the powers to declare national nature reserves. And the special became the special in the site of special scientific interests. So when we talk about a site of special scientific interest, what we mean by special is something which is considered to be of special value for its flora, fauna, or geological or physiographical features. And that is one of the most key sentences, phrases that exists in our legislation, because every single iteration of legislation from 1949 has included that definition of what we mean by special and what we mean when we say we are undertaking nature conservation to look after something that is special. Without the forethought of the work of the geology subcommittee, we would not have geology, and the Nature Reserves Committee would not have geology, we may not have geology or geomorphology sat within our legislation and everything that it's enabled. So, got 48, 49 and 1956. So what are we going to be celebrating this year? We are going to be celebrating 70 years of the Wren's Nest National Nature Reserve, declared in 1956, and England's, as Graham described it, first hard rock, because he would call it hard rock, because that's what Graham's into, National Nature Reserve. And there it is in all its glory. And we'll come back a little bit on National Nature Reserves towards the end. So, here we go. I've got two more dates coming up. One is 1977, and then we've got a 1990 date sat in there. So, what do we remember happened in 1977? Jubilee, yes! The Queen is celebrating 25 years on the throne. No! We started the Geological Conservation Review in 1977. How did the Black Country Geological Society get that wrong? Anyway, so, yes, so 1977, I was at junior school, and I remember it because I saw the Queen come by very fast in a car, and we all went out and we waved, and she went by like that. But I remember it precisely because it was a moment in time, and it was in 1977. Right, okay. So, Geological Conservation Review. So, we got all the sites identified in here. A geologist, the first Nature Conservancy geologist, William McFadden, ably went round and looked at all the sites, described them, took photographs of them, identified them as special, and all a job well done. But we came back to it with a more systematic approach in 1977, which was the establishment of the Geological Conservation Review. And that was an exercise involving all geological specialists in different fields to identify those places in England, Wales and Scotland. It was a GB-wide review, which we considered of most significance for their geology, specifically sites of international importance, sites of exceptional quality and particularly preservation, and most importantly, those sites which are representative of our understanding of the geological history of Great Britain at any given point. And that review, over a period from 1977, a period of intense activity through to the early 90s, 1990, 1991, created a list of what we call Geological Conservation Review sites, covering every topic of geology that you can think up. And that list of sites, the GCR sites, Geological Conservation Review sites, provides the underpinning and the foundation for our network of geological sites of special scientific interest. Remember, identifying places considered of special interest, which become triple SIs. You needed a consistent mechanism of identifying what we considered to be of special and minimum of national significance, and that was the GCR. Every triple SI has one or more GCR site within it. Today, there are about 4,000 triple SIs. 1,221 are geological, which is 30% of England. This is an England fact. 30% of England's triple SIs are geological, which shows you how important still geology is in the context of that nationally important protected network of sites, SSSIs. So there are 12 geological SSSIs in Staffordshire, and just to dispel the idea that it's only in the north, okay, there's a bit of a concentration in the north. This is the Geological Conservation Review sites. Those are the SSSIs, Ecton copper mines. Hume Quarry SSSI, we'll come back to that in a moment. Brown End Quarry SSSI. But in the south, you equally have a network of geological SSSIs. Kimber Edge SSSI, we'll come back to that right at the end, which is in the bottom of Staffordshire. So you have this network of geological SSSIs in Staffordshire, representative of those different geologies: Carboniferous coal measures, Carboniferous limestones, the sequence of Triassic sediments, and then touching on the Triassic in the south, and getting into the Carboniferous again in the south. So a consequence of the GCR also was to realise that those sites which didn't make the cut, weren't considered nationally important, still needed some sort of protection. And actually the Black Country has been absolutely instrumental in achieving that protection. And that was the establishment of a locally orientated system for protecting sites. So in the Black Country, in Dudley in particular, we have sites of importance for nature conservation, which were established before 1990 as a way of identifying places which were of value for nature. And importantly, in Dudley in the Black Country, they took the view that nature meant both biodiversity and geological diversity. So it was actually the first place, or one of the very earliest places, where a coherent local system for identifying local value for geological sites was established. And that was the forerunner of what we then become known as the RIG system, the Regionally Important Geological Site System. And here we have in Staffordshire, early on, again, we have Staffordshire establishing a geological record centre. They have a local plan, and in the local plan, what you don't have, you discover, is geological sites recognised. So you write to them, and when they wrote to them, the response to this submission from the planning authority was essentially, give us a list and we'll include it. And as a consequence, Staffordshire gave them a list and they included it, and we get to today where we've got a lot more than 3,000 rigs in England, but in Staffordshire we have 18 regionally important geological sites which have their origins back in the late 80s, with the establishment of the rig system in 1990. Very instrumental in establishing that. So what else have SSSIs given us? And again, this is a bit of the old Staffordshire. Shouldn't have changed your county lines, should you? Because you had something great and then you let it go. So, UNESCO sites, UNESCO designations are founded on our established mechanisms for protecting and managing our geological diversity. And the primary mechanism for that is twofold. At a national level, it's the SSSI network, and at a local level, it's the RIGS, Local Geological Site, sync mechanism, which connects into the local planning system. Without that, you have no mechanism for protecting the geology that you value, and you have no mechanism that underpins the establishment of a UNESCO designation recognizing places of global significance for their geology. So, absolute classic site is the Jurassic Coast World Heritage Site, also known as Dorset and East Devon, the Dorset and East Devon World Heritage Site, which was inscribed in 2001 and underpinned, so that's a stretch of coastline from the mouth of the River Exe to Old Harry Rocks in the east, mouth of the River Exe in the west, and it encompasses a sequence of Triassic, Jurassic and Cretaceous rocks. It's your Mesozoic sequence, associated coastal geomorphology and the Quaternary sitting on it, and that's what the Jurassic Coast is all about. But what is critical is we have a UNESCO designation which recognises that geology as of outstanding universal value, but it is only feasible to have that UNESCO designation because we have a meaningful way of managing it, and that is an underpinning network of sites of special scientific interest. So along the coast we have 63 geological conservation review sites, which underpin 13 geological sites of special scientific interest, which are your primary mechanism for managing that stretch of coast. So in 2000, Jurassic Coast is celebrating 25 years since inscription this year, so look out for exciting things on the Jurassic Coast. Could have a Black Country Geological Society visit to the Jurassic Coast, how about that? Yeah, there you go. Get that in the plans. So, 2000, you had European Geoparks established, to 2015, UNESCO Global Geoparks. It's an absolute bursting system in the globally, and we've now gone from, in 2000, the starting where we had 4 European geoparks. In 26 years, we've now got 229 UNESCO Global Geoparks across 50 countries. And in England, we have 3, the first of which, I can't remember the dates, was North Pennines, which is directly overlaps with the North Pennines AOMB, now known as a national landscape. We have the English Riviera down on the south coast in Devon, otherwise known to us as Torquay or Torbay. And then we have Staffordshire, had it, but then they let it go because they thought they had some clever things to do with county lines. And they don't have it now. The Black Country UNESCO Global Geopark, which is, at this moment in time, our most 2020, was that established 2020, our most recent UNESCO Global Geopark in England. And there are 11 UNESCO Global Geoparks across the UK. But we've got 2 more coming. And again, just to push home a little bit, Black Country, 40 plus geosites, the nationally important ones protected as SSSIs, the locally important ones here protected as SINCs, and then you've got some other geosites in there as well, which adds to the beautiful diversity of what our geopark's all about. Got 2 new applications. Actually, this is more attractive than going to the Jurassic Coast. So nearby we've got Charnwood Forest Geopark, which is majoring on one thing, the Precambrian of Charnwood Forest. It's got some beautiful Triassic, so there's a beautiful Triassic Valley fill in Barden Hill and so on. Take a look at it, they've got a wonderful website. And the other, so these are 2 active applications. So these are active applications currently with UNESCO with the proposal to become UNESCO Global Geoparks this year. The other one is really interesting cross-border collaboration between the North Kent Downs National Landscape and their equivalent organisation in northern France, which is the Parc Naturel Régional des Caps et Marais Opales. So basically they've connected chalk geologies and also they've connected chalk geologies with the story of the geological existence of the channel. And this year they go forward. So this is a good one. You pop this one on your visit list, I reckon. A trip to northern France. What more can you have? And we'll know this year, probably announce next year, the success of those applications. Moving our English geoparks to 5, which will be very good. Okay. Where are we going? So I'm going to come back to NNR. So I'm on the last stint here, heading towards the end, and worth just mentioning a bit about national nature reserves, because we have here in, not out, poor old Staffordshire. We've got the Wren's Nest National Nature Reserve, sits there, the first. So I said, yes, Nature Conservancy Council, English Nature, Natural England have the power to declare national nature reserves. Today, there are about 221, possibly a little bit more than that, national nature reserves. And we have all of those national nature reserves were declared during the reign of the Queen Elizabeth. And then when King Charles became king, we started a new initiative called the King Series of National Nature Reserves. So it was a celebration of his coronation, but also a celebration of his love for nature. And the plan was to declare over 5 years 25 new, what we call King Series National Nature Reserves, 5 a year. And we also have an ambition within that that's about, let us enable that network of national nature reserves to better tell our geological story. And so that's what we're right in the middle of at the moment. And so there are 221 national nature reserves. 2/3 of those are owned and managed by Natural England, and 1/3 are owned and managed by other organisations, which we call approved bodies. So right here, we've got the Wren's Nest National Nature Reserve, and in 2020, the Salt Wells National Nature Reserve were declared. So they're both owned and managed by Dudley Borough Council. I'm going to say Canals and Water. The Canals Trust, Canals and Waterways Trust. They also are involved in Salt Wells. There's the dots with the 221. This is just representative, the strat column, of how the NNRs slot into telling that geological story and where the gaps may lie. And the first little crowns make King's NNRs, so you can see how we're filling gaps with the King's NNRs. But the ones which have been overtly geological are particularly highlighted. So most recently we declared Bradgate Park and Swithland Wood in Charnwood Forest, capturing the Precambrian start to our story as a national nature reserve. We've been extending existing NNRs, so we've extended the Ordovician within the Stiper Stones. And then the upper Ordovician we've got up in the lakes. We've got something that's excitingly called the Borrowdale Rainforest, but it really captures the Borrowdale volcanics as well at the same time. Other ones are obvious. Very recently we declared the Bradford Gateway to the Pennines NNR, which is picking up on the Carboniferous sequence, but connecting Bradford as a city to the Pennines and putting the Pennines back into Bradford City. And so on and so forth. In the offing, this week, very excitingly, we're going to capture the Upper Cretaceous with an NNR down on the south coast, very familiar to us all, the Seven Sisters National Nature Reserve. So look out for that one, it's coming. And then later in the year, we're going to be declaring the Middle Jurassic inferior oolite of the Leckhampton Hill Cotswold Escarpment that sits just outside Cheltenham. And we will continue in that vein, filling gaps in the story. So let's just, so NNRs, why are they important? They're meant to be the best places for experiencing and representing our biological and geological diversity. They are places for people to experience the natural world. They're places where we learn about the natural world, and they're places where we undertake research and innovate in particularly nature conservation, and their primary purpose is places for nature conservation. So my last little sequence are around one of those elements of innovation on national nature reserves. And here we go. So it's around, Wren's Nest was in Staffordshire. is out of Staffordshire, but it's in my talk, which is great. And the wren's nest is really important because it's 1956, and we have one of the most complete records of repeat fixed point photography on the Wren's Nest National Nature Reserve, demonstrating how it's changed over time and equally informing the way we manage the wren's nest. So it, like in many things, it being in an urban area is one of them, it leads the way in the development of our practice of nature conservation, in this case, how we understand change and the decisions we make around managing a site as a consequence of change. In this case, gradual degradation of sections and gradual upward growth of vegetation. So now I'm going to jump to another National Nature Reserve, which was my illustration for Staffordshire. And again, here we have the traditional approach to monitoring a geological site. We all got out and did exciting things and took good photographs in 1977, the year the GCR was established and the year we all were celebrating 25 years of the Queen on the throne. What else would we be doing in a Silver Jubilee year? But here we have 1977, 1992, we did a big survey of all our geological sites, produced what we called site management briefs. This was in English Nature then, and there you have your start to get your comparison of change in terms of understanding what's changing on a site, what you need to do to manage it, is the geology still there to see, and then you bring it right up to date with traditional fixed point photography of here, Hume Quarry National Nature Reserve. So it's a Triassic sequence. It's a classic fluvial Triassic sequence representing big Triassic rivers, pebble beds, and everything that comes with it. But what we're doing now is we're shifting that approach into using more modern technology, using drone technology, to be able to record sites and as a consequence, so this is just a fly-through, this is a drone fly-through to give you a sense of the different approach that we can now take to monitoring a geological site. This is simple, this is drone photography, this is a video sequence, but equally what we're starting to do now is do still photographs, creating photogrammetry, allowing us to do 3D, highly detailed 3D representations of geological sites. It's particularly good at getting into bigger sites and seeing more difficult to access areas. And we're now starting to add into that LiDAR technology so we can see through vegetation cover and then ground truth it with imagery on the ground. So I'm running the sequence because it just actually shows a step change in the way we're now monitoring geological sites. And we're using National Nature Reserves as a place to experiment on that. And the Wren's Nest is one of those places where we're starting to look at it, but particularly in a real small micro scale. And here's my last slide. And in a way, this is I put it in, and I forgot why I put it in, but I reminded myself why I put it in when I looked at the map of Staffordshire, because and I'm just bringing us back, and this is my last slide, and this is all about in and out of Staffordshire in one sense. And this is something, so when the GA went to Birmingham and the Lapworth, I did a little poster using the GA archive again, and what I liked about this was I looked to see when had the GA been to, we're in Birmingham for our conference, when had the GA been to Birmingham, and they did a long excursion in 1898. That was a summer excursion where they went to the Birmingham district, and they went to all sorts of places. But this is the beauty of the archive, is it not only photographs the geology, it photographs the people who were looking at the geology, and it's really well labelled. So this event was led by Charles Lapworth, and actually we can find Charles Lapworth because there he is, and there's Mrs. Lapworth enjoying every moment of the field trip, as you can see. But also it's got Lapworth's children in here, they're here, and it's got a number of other characters which are very relevant to the GA, so past presidents of the GA. Some may know Professor W.W. Watts. He did a lot of work on Charnwood Forest and the what was not the Precambrian but became the Precambrian. And actually these photographs come out of an album. There were 2 albums by this lady, M.S. Johnson, and this is one of her albums and set of photographs. And here's the Staffordshire connection, because actually they went to Birmingham, but they photographed themselves on Kimber Edge, which was right down on the very bottom edge of it. But also, when they went to Birmingham, they couldn't resist it, could they? But they came to Dudley. And if you look at the account, there's a beautiful account which I précede here, because they came to Dudley, they went to the Wren's Nest. On the last day, they returned to Dudley, so implied they'd been there before, where they travelled underground by canal boat, avoiding the rain, and emerging into the Wren's Nest through candle-lit limestone caverns. So they actually did what we dream of doing, which was get on a canal boat and go into the Wren's Nest hill, get out of the canal boat and climb up through the caverns with candles and emerge onto the Wren's Nest to collect fossils. So that's still a dream which we're going to realise. And that has brought me all the way around conserving geoheritage in and out of Staffordshire. And the in and the out is very much about Black Country versus Staffordshire, but in the end it's just all geology and it's all together. And here we are, and there you go. And that is the conclusion.
So I'd like you to thank Jonathan on your behalf for such a fascinating talk. Thank you.